Welcome to the Addiction Solution Podcast. I'm Michelle Dunbar. Enjoy listening and watching as addiction experts Mark Sheeran and I cover controversial as well as helpful topics on addiction, how to move past it, and other related subjects. As two of the co-founders of the Freedom Model, Mark and I will give you a completely new perspective on the topics that matter to you. We will take to task the Recovery Society's lies and misinformation and replace them with facts, research, and the methods to move on from addiction struggles without 12-step meetings, rehabs, and the shackles of endless recovery. Let's escape the treatment and recovery trap together and learn.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Addiction Solution. I'm Michelle Dunbar.
And I'm Mark Sheeran, and we are the co-authors of the Freedom Model for Addictions, Escape the Treatment and Recovery Trap, with our colleague, Stephen Slate.
And we are so excited to tell you about our coaching certification program. And it's very exciting. We're coming into the home stretch. We're just about done. I have emailed a bunch of people who expressed interest. If you did not get an email from me, it is because I couldn't find your email. So please send me another one, or check your junk or spam folder, because you may not have gotten the email from me because it went to your junk or spam folder. And what the email was saying was, you're going to get an update. Everything is going to be solidified. The cost of it, exactly what it entails, all of the details will be emailed to you on or around May 5th. So that's 2 weeks from today. Okay.
And for the people that haven't signed up or shown interest or emailed us at info@thefreedommodel.org, there will be a web page devoted to this, actually multiple pages. And so you'll have all the information at your fingertips at that point on thefreedommodel.org. This is going to be a movement. This is going to replace the 12-step paradigm over time. And it's going to be through people like you, the people that are interested in being coaches, the people that are coaches currently, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, people in the medical community, teachers. You'll love this approach because it's based on cognitive behavioral education, something we created 36 years ago. So it's a completely different model. For those of you that know the Freedom Model, that know this book, it's going to make sense to you. For those that don't know it, and this is maybe the first time you've heard about this or the Freedom Model, I suggest you read the book, get the audio book, and listen to it on the way to work or whatever. Get one of our workshops, the Solution to Addiction workshops, and study it and take a look at what we're doing. I think you'll be amazed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we got a wonderful email from somebody who is reading our book and is systematically listening to all our podcasts. And he suggested this topic, which, yes, we have covered. And he says that, but there's so many angles you can hit this from. So here's what he says. He says, this is my habitual thought pattern. I often find my mind wandering back to the past and beating myself up for why I didn't do better at the time. In 2019, I was 43. I was in the best financial position prior to going to CA, which is Cocaine Addicts Anonymous. And now fast forward to 2025, I'm 49. I'm in a bad position, needing to build up from the start again. And the job market in the UK is presently challenging. Habitual thoughts like, why did I waste my time in CA and become a target labeled as a hopeless, relapsing addict? Why did I let people's opinions of me self-perpetuate? Why did I waste my time with those meaningless relationships? Why? Your episode on shame and guilt was brilliant. Choose your hard, either hopeful and opportunities may arise, or shameful and regretful, which is a dead end. However, I'd like this topic revisited if possible. And it's always I love hearing from our listeners.
I do too.
We are happy to revisit topics because we can always hit it from a different angle.
Yeah. And I was saying to Michelle earlier when we read this, I think that the topic I want to focus on is regret.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting twist that Michelle said, the fact that when you are dwelling in regret, that you see value in regret. This is always the thing about the freedom model that is so different from everything else. So seemingly negative behaviors have this strange twist with the positive drive principle. And if you've read our book, you understand what that is. It's chapter 7. It's crucial that you understand this. And that is that no human being ever acts consciously against themselves.
Nope.
Now you may say, well, being regretful and depressed and anxious is against yourself. Well, no, it's not. You're dwelling on the thoughts and the beliefs that create these ideas because you see value in them at that moment. So let me give you an example with regret. So a lot of times regret is a lot like, I would say, guilt and shame, in that you can really spend a lot of time there. And what value is that then? How am I expressing my positive drive through regret? That's sort of a strange idea for a lot of people. Well, it's just like the example I've given before with like a bad marriage. You can get beat up in a bad marriage. A guy can spend decades of his life being unsatisfied, and yet he stays or she stays. And that's because behind all the upfront pain and all that everybody kind of stares at and says, what are you, crazy? Like when you're dwelling in regret, right? What a waste of time that is. You're seeing benefit in it. You're seeing, in the case of the bad marriage, those little slices of love, those tiny pieces. In regret, what is the tiny piece of positive in regret? And that is that it is a great distraction. Right. It's a great distraction from moving forward. So regret is the real, deep, powerful obsession with the past, of recreating the past. Now, when we do this in our mind, we quite literally don't move forward. We are literally taking the past, dwelling upon the failure there, and bringing it into our present. It's like a package deal. It's like, here, I'm going to take this thing that doesn't even exist anymore, and I'm going to make it relevant. And boy, there's a power in that, because then you don't have to move forward.
No.
That's the value.
Well, and it also, you're kind of pseudo getting rid of your responsibility for moving forward, right? So if you are driving in your car and you are focusing on the rear view mirror, but you're still going forward, so to speak, you're kind of advocating, I hate that word. I can't even say it. Responsibility. You're setting aside responsibility for what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a certain amount of, like, I've spent times in my life where I have continued to function. I'm a highly functional person.
Yeah.
Right. And I can function ruminating on the past. I can continue to do my daily activities, to go do what I got to do, but all the while thinking all of these negative things about myself, about my life, about my relationships. And what happens when you do that? You find yourself in this rut, right? Where you're just kind of existing each day, and maybe nothing is really going terrible, but nothing's going good either. Right. And now when you get in that spot, it becomes really easy to feel like a victim. And there's a certain amount of benefit in that too.
There is. So a lot of the uncomfortable parts of life, because humans live in an uncomfortable world, it becomes a stable world. So if you stay in a bad marriage, or you stay in a state of regret is the preoccupation with past failure. And it's the allure of it is the fact that it actually already happened. So there is no risk in thinking about it.
Right.
So it's enormously stable.
Right.
So stability is comforting, because, and we've talked about this many times in different podcasts, but we're getting so much sort of questions about this behind the scenes.
Because it's huge. It's everything.
Yeah.
For happiness in life overall.
So because the world is spinning, literally, and changing, literally the ground under our feet, that's called tectonic plates is literally floating in a sea of magma all the time, moving. That's what creates volcanoes and creates land. And literally, endlessly, things are evolving like that. And that's just in the material world. Now think about all people's thoughts, the ability to think freely. So you have this really unstable environment where even your mate or the people close to you can one day decide they don't like you, or decide to have a view of you that's wrong. And then your boss blames you for something that didn't happen. And then somebody runs a red light and smacks into your car. Here's my point. All this instability is everybody trying desperately to make their life happy. And there's collisions, and there's rubs, and there's mistakes, and there's all this instability. Well, going into regret or self-pity or even anxiety about it all is sort of a mechanism that we use to create some stability, because it's inside our mind. We have control of it. So I can control the narrative by blocking out the present, by thinking about the past. And you can spend, people, if they're really hardcore about it, they can spend time in bed. It will literally make you bedridden. It will make it so that you no longer can even think about moving your hands and your feet to go to work. And that's what we call depression. But depression is just the hyper focus on the benefits of utter stability as a protective mechanism from the world's instability. And it isn't talked about very much like that, but that's the reality of most depression. Most focuses on regret, most focuses on self-pity. It's valuable to people, or they wouldn't give it so much energy. And I know, because I did it.
Me too.
I did it.
Me too. And it's, I hate to say it, but it's easier in some respects. For a period of time, it's comforting and easy. And now, in the end, it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It makes life a lot more difficult because the more we'll go to the rear view mirror again. The more you're looking into the rear view mirror, you're not seeing what's happening in front of you, and life is just going to hit you and blindside you.
That's exactly right.
And so in the end, it's harder, but initially it can be comforting. And that's why, like, you see things online when people say, yes, you're going to have these habitual thoughts, right? Especially if you're somebody that spent a lot of time ruminating and feeling bad about yourself, and you, especially if you're trying to break that habit. So you have these habitual thoughts. So the question is, well, how do I make them stop? Well, you may not, the only way really to make habitual thoughts stop is to disregard them in the moment and move on and move on. And you have to do that consciously. You have to consciously say, I'm going to let that go.
Yeah.
I'm going to let that go and move forward and act as if I didn't even have it. And that takes mindfulness and practice. And so, and challenging it, of course, as well, because the other part of that is, like when you see a child that's learning to walk, a child doesn't spend any of its time regretting that it didn't know how to walk when it was crawling. Right. And that's kind of the way we have to look at it.
That's a great point.
Right.
Yeah. Babies are always looking forward.
When you learned how to drive a car, and you rode your bike everywhere and you learned how to drive a car, did you spend even a minute thinking, why the hell didn't I learn to drive sooner?
Let's look at that for a minute. So this is regret. Regret is very much a first world problem.
Yeah.
So when and I've used this example in other podcasts, when they had the tsunami in Indonesia and we sent in a bunch of counselors. The people in Indonesia that had just been wiped out, what was left of those people, were like, we don't need counseling. We need to build stuff, like get fresh water and get some antibiotics, and
we need electricity.
We need housing. And well, that's a classic example of where, and it's a very poignant and extreme example of the world changing the rules. Quite literally a 35-foot wave out of nowhere comes and wipes out your entire family, right? And you're standing there on a desolate, destroyed beach. And along come people from first world who say, you must be feeling bad. Well, I'm sure they were feeling bad. I'm sure they were totally traumatized. But the point is, the world wasn't stopping. The sun was still beating. It was still 98 degrees, full humidity, and there was disease rampant now because water was covering everything, along with carnage and dead bodies, and the world had changed. And so we that live in first world have a lot of time to not live like that. Right. So we've mitigated a lot of the world's change by, frankly, getting ahead of it, by being productive as a society. Well, now it starts to cascade in on itself. We have a little bit of time. We start ruminating and we start thinking about ourselves more than we're thinking about projects, our struggles, our past. We start and we have time because, well, we can isolate ourselves in an air-conditioned apartment that somebody else is laboring somewhere else, getting the coal to run that generator, which then creates electricity, and all this stuff is happening for us. So we're isolated from the visceral reality that the universe is charging against us. So what do? We have time. We have time to ruminate,
which is a luxury.
So now we have time to think about our past, bring it forward, and literally, quite literally, create little bastions of misery that we can use to deflect from the uncertainty of the future. Because even in first world, even in America, Europe, Australia, even in these countries that we really have wonderful lives, we do sense that the world is changing around us. It does demand that we make money. It does demand that we have rent to pay. It does demand that we still have disease to deal with, and sickness, and all the things that third world deals with, we do deal with. It's going to land on your lap. And here's the crazy part. In first world, the more we sit, the more we're inviting the third world problems into our life, because when you sit and you ruminate, that change creeps in.
It does, whether you like it or not.
And you can't insulate yourself. And then if you do insulate yourself in your own apartment, you have just created your own third world environment yourself. You're creating misery out of thin air by not doing. Now, I'm not one of these people that's like, I always talk about this new alpha male, super purpose-driven life. I think all that stuff is great. But the reality is human beings just want to be happy. And what I do know is that if we practice the art of this is it, just not creating misery. So if you can avoid self-pity, if you can avoid thinking about the past and being deeply regretful, and you get on with, well, I was regretful of that, I'm not going to do it again. And I'm going to move forward with my life in some small capacity. And if you do that, and you practice that art, you will become immeasurably happier, whether you're third world, somewhere in between, or first world. It doesn't matter. Those laws apply. So if you just move forward, abandon self-pity, say, no, I'm not allowed to have that. Immediately, the world opens up. Oh, what do I have to do? Let me get ahead of the world a little bit. Let me be prepared.
You can still act feeling unsure, insecure, unsure of the future, unsure of your own abilities. You can feel a whole bunch of things and still move forward with optimism. And I'm not sure if I made that clear, but
we did.
But so when I say, it is a matter of just reminding yourself, that's what happened yesterday. I did the best I could.
Yeah.
Right. I did the best I could with the information I had at hand. And have there been times in my life? There have been many when I've thought, God, I wish I knew that back then. I mean, my kids are grown. I have grandchildren. I am a different person with my grandchildren than I was with my children. 150%.
Yep.
Right. And do I still think, Do I regret what I did with my children? No, I don't waste a minute because I was a brand new parent in my 20s and I did the best I could and I didn't do bad. Okay? Now, were there things I would have done differently knowing what I know now? Hell yeah. You know, but I get to do that with my grandchildren now.
Well, so the grandparent thing, because I'm going through it as well, is really unique because I'm dealing with the same sort of challenges with babies when we have them.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with the same conceivable fears that I could have had, but I deal with them differently.
Totally differently. Totally.
Now, but I want to make the point that all the same fears could exist.
Sure.
But with experience, I do know more. I just know more. And so I think it's really important to say to yourself, human beings have been getting through this thing called life in much, much more difficult circumstances and in history.
For sure.
And they still had children. You know, I think about the married couples in Auschwitz, you know, in having babies in concentration camps. And I look at that and getting married and having relationships and building a world behind those in hell, in human hell. And I think, geez, if they can do it there, I certainly can do it in my circumstances, but everything is relative.
It is relative.
This isn't a judgment that you who have first world problems, when I say those things, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying that first world allows for space for us to ruminate. It gives us time. And the beauty of first world issues is that time could be spent doing something that gets ahead of the curve a little bit. The curve of the world is running against you. Things are shifting and changing constantly. You know, the sort of uncomfortableness about human living. And so now if you're in a third world situation or somewhere in between, a society that's in between these two worlds, you're going to be forced to deal with things on a daily level that fill up your time. And you won't have much choice because life will demand it of you. You'll have less choice. But so your day is lined up. I have to go find food. I have to go find water. I have to deal with sickness. I have to deal with all these things because there aren't safety nets. But for the people that have safety nets or societies where those things exist, you can really rocket forward. You have opportunities that are massive. That scares people.
Yeah, it does.
That's where that open-endedness scares people. And then they rocket back into that regretful state or something to divert their attention from, geez, I can go be successful. Really? There's all these options. And they did studies on this and I experienced this. I'll be working on some projects and I'll have multiple projects. And in an arena, let's say I'm a gunsmith. So I might build a whole bunch of project rifles in a year. And I'll say, this one is for this weather. This one is for this hunt. This one is for target shooting. And after a while, I start to get anxious because there's so many multiple options and I've detailed it and I'm thinking about it and I'm like, wait a minute. Then I end up selling. I do this all the time.
Yeah, he does.
Then I end up selling everything and doing deals and I simplify down to like one gun. And then that's what I shoot and I'm happy. So sometimes when we have many options,
right,
you can become unhappy with that too. So there's this strange balance and you have to find yours where you say to yourself, I just want to be happy. Right now, I'm going to think about the past and be regretful. Okay. The freedom model doesn't judge that.
Not at all.
I get it. Sometimes we call it nostalgia. We put a nice spin to it and we think about fun times.
Yeah.
But you can get really depressed thinking about fun times if you think about them too much and you're not moving forward. You'll notice this weird balance between it's okay to think about the past and it's very productive. And then it starts to become a waste of time. And then you'll start feeling bad because you're not moving your life forward. Well, those are the gauges that your soul, your consciousness, whatever, your mind, you just have to figure out yours. Me, I can't spend a lot of time in the past. I can't because I get miserable really quick. It's just how I'm driven and how I've decided that I'm going to live my life. But I'm not that crazy. Some days when I'm out in the woods and I'm just sitting and I get nostalgic, it's fun to just ruminate. That's okay too. So anyway.
Well, so I think the moral of the story is, so to speak, you made a great point, Mark, that sometimes it's okay to remember the past and the good, like especially when you lose someone close to you and you want to you have fond memories of that person. I mean, initially you're going to be totally sad that they're gone, and maybe you have some regret that you didn't do more for that person in their life or see them that one last time. But ultimately it's a natural progression of mourning to move from being very, very sad at what you know you're going to miss in the future, right? You're going to miss your time with that person, to going to those fond memories. And, you know, in a lot of cultures, they have rituals
Oh yeah.
that actually or take people through those things within a matter of days.
Yep.
And like with the Italians and the Irish, you know, we get together and we have a little party and we eat and drink and talk about the person and say, you know, funny stories about that person. And it really is cathartic in a way. But then life moves on.
Yeah.
And so for the people that ruminate, they stay in this place of unhappiness. And I've done this with losing someone, and recognize that I was choosing it. And the benefit I saw in that was I was fearful that if I let go and moved on, that I would forget, or that I didn't love this person enough, or that it was a way for me to hang on to that relationship, right? Instead of allowing that relationship to evolve to something different. And so I think that's another part of it. When you're ruminating on regret, you might be actually mourning that person you were.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, and not allowing yourself to let that person go and evolve.
Well, that's a great point. So what you're talking about there, if we were to tie it up into a word, is learning.
Yes.
And so learning is the process of gauging your present and your future against the past. And that can happen in milliseconds. Like, for instance, I can learn that picking up this cup, there's an easier way to do it. And in real time, I can figure that out because I've picked up a cup so many times. I know what it feels like. So picking it up differently, I just learned something. I'm more efficient to get it to my mouth or whatever the point is. So, but that on a macro scale, that applies too. Sometimes we have these big relationships and they end terribly, or some big life event and we regret it and we say, geez, I wish I didn't cheat on that person, or I wish I didn't hurt that person, or I wish I'd done something differently this way, or whatever it might be. And it's okay to feel regret of all those things and then learn from them and say, well, I think that I won't do that again. And then to Michelle's point, as you, I guess the point of increasing happiness happens usually when you're able to let that ball and chain from the past go, the guilt, the shaming that keeps you there. And instead it becomes a learning situation. I think when you first have regret, it's because the taste and sourness of whatever the event was is so fresh.
Yeah.
And you're kind of reeling like, what the fuck? What just happened?
Right.
You know, I can't believe I just did this thing. And you regret it, or I didn't do this thing, or I didn't put the money in that stock. What was I thinking? I let my fear guide me, you know, whatever it is. And then with a little space from that thing, a little time, you ruminate and get into the guilt stage and remorse. And then the question becomes, at what point do you learn from it and move on from it?
Yes.
So that's what life is all about, is navigating difficulty.
Yeah.
I got a dry patch.
That's right. So look at let's end this one very positive. So there's the opposite of rumination, right?
Yeah.
Which is you get into a mode of where everything seems like it's going right.
Yep.
And most of the time that happens when you're busy, when you're making progress in something that is valuable, you see value in doing, when you're uh, making positive changes within relationships.
Or when you're blindly moving forward on faith.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
In spite of what's happening around you. And there's been a couple times in my life when life has kind of blindsided me. And when I've been in periods of rumination, and then all of a sudden something happens. And I can remember, and I'm going to talk about this one because it was a long ways away, right? My children were young. I think my youngest was 2 and my older son was going on he was in pre-K. And my husband had a massive seizure at work. And Mark remembers this very well because he and I weren't even speaking at the time. I mean, talk about I was in a very difficult point in my life.
Yep.
And when somebody like I was getting through the days, but I was a young mother. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had left AA. Like I was kind of out on my own, hanging out there in the wind. I didn't have a lot of support from people. My marriage was rocky.
Yeah.
And that happened. And my dad shows up at my house. And it's like, you got to get in the car. Bob is in the hospital, and Bob worked in a hospital. I'm like, well, of course he's at the hospital. He works there. And he didn't really tell me anything else. My dad and I weren't even speaking at the time. So I was like, this is very odd. This is all very strange. But Dad was very serious. And so I think I had my youngest, and my only friend, which was Mark's sister at the time, came and got him and took him. And so here I am, I'm on my way to this hospital, which is almost an hour away. And I don't know what's going on. And as we were halfway to the hospital, he told me that CPR was in progress. My entire world changed in that instant. In that instant, everything changed. There was no more rumination about my difficulties in my marriage. There was no more worrying about money. There was no more worrying about any of that stuff. All I could focus on in that moment was, I'm going to be a 32-year-old widow.
Right.
Okay. And I'm going to lose my best friend and my husband all at once. And nothing else mattered in that moment. And so in this instant, like this was a massive shift in my world, and everything became very clear on what I needed to do.
Yeah.
Everything gets very, very clear.
It does.
And Mark was at the hospital and stayed with us for a period of days, and we hadn't spoken in months at that point. Right. And we didn't miss a beat. And boy, that was just one of those events in my life that I can point to and say, I changed hardcore. And I learned that all that rumination on all the nonsense, the things about life that are kind of like everyday bullshit that people go through, all that rumination was irrelevant. It didn't matter anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so and then everything gets clear and you move forward. And I went from being in a dark place to, knowing where I needed to go forward and being in a great place.
Yeah. It's wild how a shift in what you think and circumstance can change you. I think there's also a certain amount of willingness you have to listen to what the hell is going on around you.
Yeah.
I am you're like me, where it takes sometimes a cataclysmic event to shift us.
Yeah.
Because we're so driven and so pigheaded that sometimes we're actually working against ourselves in a certain way.
That's so true.
And so I think sometimes you got to just, for some of us, it's stop being so driven and lighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
I see that with my daughter. She's a hard charging person, and every
She
once in a while she has
is.
to go, whoa, I'm a little
Yeah.
too intense about this. And she ends up being more productive when she slows down. So there's all kinds of things that you have to figure out. But here's what I do know. In the end, the world is going to correct you.
It does have a way of doing that.
It is going to correct you. And the question is, are you listening?
Yeah. You're paying attention.
Yeah. Or are you going to do the same thing? And are you going to ignore all the signs and all the people that entered your life? And sometimes the signs are all the wrong people are in your life. And sometimes you're the wrong person for somebody else. And sometimes you got to correct that by leaving a relationship or getting away from those people and stop harming them. And there's all kinds of variables about this. But it's all about learning. And so let's wrap it up with regret. So regret can be used to ruminate, to avoid life, to create some negative stability in your life. There's value in negative stability because it can temporarily insulate you from the difficulty of life, but it's a poor insulation.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen with regret, like self-pity, like depression, like anxiety, these investments we make, they will align themselves with the negative, sort of what I call meteors landing in your lap.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're aligning your thoughts, and this is how I want to tie this up, with the more negative factors you can't control. You're already going to have negative things that you can't control enter your life, whether you like it or not, because that's what you're trying to avoid with these negative insulators. So we all, if you look at it, that's what you're doing. You're like, I don't want to deal with rent. I don't want to deal with weight loss. I don't want to deal with my cancer. I don't want to deal with my bad marriage. I don't want to deal with, so I'm just going to sit and ruminate on the past and how shitty it's been and then delve into self-pity and depression. I'm just going to focus on that because that I can control. Okay, I got it. I got the value of control. But ultimately, at some point, you're going to have to problem solve and get caught up with the world. Get caught up with this shifting universe. Here's the great part about that, though. When you make the decision to do that, you can quickly catch up. All the problems become solvable. And this is really important to know, that when you have a shift in the mind, you shift everything. You shift the way you do things, you shift your habits, you shift your physicality, you change all of your decisions, all of that changes. And so once you decide, I'm not going to focus on stability and the past and regret and pain, and instead I'm just going to let it go for a little while, and I'm going to think about what should I do next to maybe lose the weight, do this, do that. Your life will spin into a much better place. That's a fact.
It is. It is. So yeah, you might start thinking about regret. And yes, you have a choice in that moment when you recognize it to be like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm going to open my mind to the possibilities for a better future.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to learn from this.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
All right. Well, don't forget, we have workshops. We have the Solution to Addiction workshop, the Solution to PMO workshop, very affordable. If you're struggling with a substance use problem or a PMO problem or any kind of behavior problem for that matter, those workshops can help you to figure out the value you see in it and begin to devalue that activity in your life, because that's the way you solve that problem, is to devalue it. You've got it on a pedestal. That's why you're still doing it. You see tremendous value in it, over and above a lot of other things in your life. Because remember, what addiction actually is a dedication to something. It's not something that's happening to you. It's something that you're doing. And we also have coaching packages that start at $500. So check that out at thefreedommodel.org. We are here to help you. We can help you solve your problem.
That's right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Hey. like and follow us.
Oh yeah, our marketing firm says, please.
Why will you not say that? And so if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening or watching. Like it and follow us. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on social media.
Yeah.
It helps us a lot.
We have groups too.
Yeah, go to our group, the Freedom Model group on Facebook. All right. Now I'm going to let you go. Have a great week.
Bye.